The Mazda CX-50 Hybrid. Yes, the Takumis in Alabama have been busy. This is the much requested hybrid variant of their bestseller, one of their bestsellers, the CX-50. This is built in Huntsville, Alabama at the joint Toyota Mazda factory. From a pricing perspective, how does this thing shape up? Well, it's priced right between their base CX-50 naturally aspirated four-popper and their turbocharged variant. Pricing starts at just under $34,000 and maxes out, as our tester did, just over $40,000. There's about a 10 to 15 mile per gallon increase over the naturally aspirated four-popper and the turbocharged variant. And when it comes to horsepower, it sits between both of them. This makes a combined system output of 219. You get about 40 miles per gallon combined, which is very good in an SUV this size. This has the heart of a Toyota. This is essentially the drivetrain right out of the RAV4 Hybrid with the body, suspension tuning, and packaging from Mazda. This is a CX-50. So from an exterior perspective, it looks like a regular CX-50 with some minor changes, most notably some hybrid badges. The interior packaging is identical to the regular CX-50. Despite the battery pack and the hybrid setup, nothing's changed, which means the seats fold down flat, you have a big trunk, rear seats are large enough for full-size adults, front cargo capacity is the same, seats are the same, which are a mixed bag. These are not the most comfortable seats in the world, but I'll leave their usability and comfort up to you, and on the higher trims, they are heated and cooled. The same infotainment setup, same door design, it's a CX-50. When it comes to the actual usability of everything, it sort of sits between the CRV and the RAV4. This is a little more car-like. You don't have all the storage and nooks and crannies of something like a CRV or a RAV4, but again, that usability is up to you. The main changes from the interior space is a unique hybrid gauge cluster, some drive mode changes. That leads us to the technical aspects of this car. As I mentioned earlier, this has the drivetrain right out of the RAV4 Hybrid. This is the prior gen Toyota hybrid system. It has a 1.6 kilowatt hour nickel metal hydride battery pack. It has 3 electric motors, one that runs the all-wheel drive in the back and 2 in the engine. The 2.5 liters right out of Toyota, it's their direct and port injected Atkinson cycle 2.5 liter 4-cylinder. Their eCVT is identical. It is essentially Toyota's hybrid setup that you know and love at this point, which means it's going to be reliable, relatively easy to service, and most of the costs when it comes to battery packs and really the drivetrain is a known, fairly inoffensive quantity at this point. When it comes to suspension tuning, this is on their modular Sky Active small vehicle platform, which means a strut front. Yes, it does not have an independent suspension in the rear. It's still a torsion beam, which hurts ride quality, but the suspension tuning is specific to the hybrid variant because the increase of weight due to the battery pack and all the other hybrid components, the spring rates have gone up, though the ride frequency is about the same. Steering tuning is unique. You don't have Mazda's GVC, and you don't have a traditional all-wheel drive setup. So the driving of this car is a little less engaging than the more traditional CX-50 models. The all-wheel drive setup also has unique tuning, as again, you don't have a mechanical connection between front and rear, so the drive modes reflect that. But with that, let's go take a quick drive with Mark on our favorite Illinois roads. CX-50 Hybrid, Mark.
That sounds familiar.
It's because this has the identical drivetrain to a RAV4 Hybrid. This is basically a blend, or a hybrid, no pun intended, between a CX-50 and a RAV4, and it takes the best and worst attributes of both vehicles and blends them into a single product. What are your feelings?
I thought about this when I saw that Mazda was doing a hybrid, and I'm like, oh God, how are they possibly going to do this with the budget? You know, they're working on inline 6, new platforms. How do they do everything? And then when this showed up, and I found out that it was a partial Toyota hybrid drivetrain, I'm like, that's either the stupidest thing they could ever do or the most genius move, because there's no way you could develop something better than this with the budget that you'd have to work with.
In a commodity product.
Right. It's just almost pointless. We don't need another brand new hybrid setup that's trying to do what they're trying to do here. So I think it was smart to leverage their partnership because it gets them what they need to do. It achieves Toyota's goal, and Akio's been talking about this for the past 8 years. Strategic partnerships, licensing out their technology, growing their supplier base. They basically want to take over the world. So, I mean, them working together here is the best of what both brands can do. And it also keeps them afloat. It gives them what they need in a vehicle like this for better fuel economy without the massive development costs. So again, that's the business side. Now, what does that mean to actual person buying this?
So the pro part is the hybrid system in this car. This is the, I guess, 4th gen hybrid setup. This is not Toyota's most current generation hybrids that you're seeing in new vehicles, like is it the Camrys on the new?
Yeah, Camrys on the new.
And the what else? Other products that are on the new the new hybrid setup. This is the older setup, which means the engagement of the electric motors and the internal combustion motors are very, very smooth. The con, because this is a Toyota 4-popper, is it's
noisy.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been. They're 4 cylinders. And now, to be fair, the 5th gen version is a little bit quieter. They did figure out how to isolate it out of it better. But I think what is good about this is we're constantly beating this drum of what's it going to be like the service long term. You're buying this because you're keeping it. You're not buying this to flip it or to lease it. So having this battery pack, nickel metal hydride, which has been around for a long time, various iterations, it's easy to get to, easy to service, and it's not horribly expensive to replace it, and you can get refurb packs on the cheaper end. Obviously the part numbers are going to be different, but it's going to be the same hardware, right? So I think long term it poses less of a risk to keep it. We've known this is a known commodity for a long time. So basically, drivetrain-wise, it's exactly what you expect from a RAV4.
CVT is, I can't tell the difference in the way it's calibrated versus a Toyota product. I know there are calibration differences, but it basically, unless you are Watt for a long period of time, you don't notice the fact that it's a CVT.
Yeah.
It mostly falls into the background. So an eCVT doesn't really have that rubber band effect unless you are in power mode and you just stand on the gas like you're going to merge from 0 to 80 miles an hour.
Right.
Then you notice it. Fuel efficiency is pretty good. We have a long-term CX-50, which I've referenced throughout this video. That is a premium plus turbocharged 4-cylinder variant, and that car is lucky on regular gas to eke out 25, 26 miles per gallon combined.
Which is a hard sell.
Yes.
Honestly, if you're looking for just a straight point A to point B machine and you don't need engagement or, shifting points and all the things that a lot of people that they say they want, but really in a car like this isn't very important.
This car gets, our fuel economy is reading low because this has been idling while I've been filming it.
Yeah.
But you're probably getting at least mid-30s to high 30s combined. Highway fuel economy for Toyota hybrids is not as good as their city because you're basically leaning entirely on the internal combustion motor at higher speeds. We're talking 85, 90, 80 miles an hour range. But this is very, very efficient compared to the turbocharged application, and it's not as slow feeling as the base, naturally aspirated 2.5 in the CX-50.
Yeah, and I guess it's good because you do have the option now. Mazda's kind of been saddled with the 2 engines that they've had. The 2.5 really is now the exclusive engine in the turbocharged effect. It is quick. When you go back to back, there's no comparison.
Yeah, it's much faster.
This feels like a total putter. And dynamically, I know, you have power mode, you have the trail mode in normal, and then you do have the ability to go into kind of a transmission setting where you can kind of simulate gears if you really need to. Namely, if you're in uphill or downhill, you can use it as fake engine braking. So they have all the traditional systems here that you would expect, but really the drivability is what's different here compared to the regular CX-50. While the steering calibration is different.
It's worse.
It's worse here. They did change spring rates because of the weight.
Yeah.
And it's got the traditional stuff that Mazda does great, which the rebound effect, the way that the car comes up after a compression is very balanced and smooth, but it is on the firmer side compared to a RAV4.
Or
it is
CRV.
Or a CRV. It is a lot harsher, I would say, in this vehicle than some of the other cars, but it does give you better body control. It does control the car and the size of this very well. But again, you know, what do you want in a car? So this is trying to blend some of the Mazda, to your point, the Mazda DNA with some of the Toyota stuff, where the Toyota stuff is kind of a snooze. So this improves on some of it, but the steering definitely is worse, namely off center.
Yeah, so when you have it loaded up, when you're actually turning the wheel, even in this lane, it feels very similar to the regular CX-50. By design, they tried to tune it to feel that way. But you don't have GVC.
Right.
You don't have a physically connected front and rear axle in this car. So for whatever reason, the off-center feel has a much bigger dead zone than you get in the CX-50.
So I would just say, for somebody that's looking to give you a straight explanation, is to Jack's point, when you turn the wheel and you get it turned, it's very direct. It points where you want it to go. It's really stable and solid. It's just when you go back to that center, there's a lot more slop in the center. It's more vague, and it's not typical Mazda steering in that regard. So, I mean, honestly, once you start turning the wheel and turning, there's no issue. It's just you're going to notice you're going to have to adjust yourself to the way that the car kind of moves when you're off center and just kind of cruising along like this.
I do think the ride quality, to your point, the rebound's pretty good, but what you're doing most of the time is in a straight line like this. We're sitting in traffic, that's why I decided to do this route. And you're hitting these undulations in the road, and because of the torsion beam, there's still a lot more harshness in the initial impacts than both in the RAV4 and the CRV, but this makes up for it with much better handling characteristics. We are going to be doing an upcoming giant hybrid 2-row CUV comparison test, but before we shoot that video, which is going to be a nightmare to edit, do you have any thoughts of how this sort of stacks up with the big two that we like, the CRV and the RAV4?
To me, it's really, really hard. I think we always say RAV4 by default.
Because it's an appliance.
Because it's a total appliance.
But you now have the reliability of the RAV4.
Yeah, so I guess where this is if you want a better driving RAV4, you know, in some of the Mazda-ness in styling, which I will say I do like the styling better here.
Yes, it looks very good.
I think it is less generic. There's no reason why you wouldn't choose this over maybe a RAV4 hybrid, but it's very, very difficult. I couldn't even say what to choose. You're just going to have to drive them and figure out what you like better.
Or wait for a comparison.
Yeah, or just wait for our comparison and then buy whatever we tell you to buy.
All right, Mark, so with that, let's head on the final thoughts, sir.
Sounds good.
Final thoughts on the Mazda CX-50. Huge thanks to our Mazda reps and, of course, the various engineers they bothered with our questions, like Dave Coleman. And of course, thanks to Mazda of Crystal Lake, Anderson Mazda of Crystal Lake, James specifically, for giving us a CX-50 to shoot some B-roll with. Now, what do we think about the car? Well, the pros and cons of the CX-50 are still here. The ride quality is arguably a touch worse than the CRV, though it is more engaging to drive than its nearest Japanese competitors. You take the good and the bad. The hybrid setup does make a big difference though. Fuel economy is dramatically better, and in the real world, most of the time what you're doing with vehicles like this is driving in a straight line. So the less it costs you to drive, the better, and that's the joy of the CX-50 Hybrid. So with that, thanks for watching, hope to see you again soon.